Well, I think that when we're talking about negotiation, and I think when we look at a history, and I think at least so far a 2-year track record of working with Republicans, I have several bills in which I have Republicans as my second author, and working across the party lines is absolutely crucial, even if you're in the majority, because you want this to be a bill that's good for everybody, not just good for one side, and that's what my track record shows. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. We'll move on to the second question. This question is for candidate Gunderson. If elected on November 4th, which committees would you seek to serve on, why, and how do those committees' responsibilities mesh with concerns of your citizens and businesses in the district?
Thank you. Commerce would be a committee that I would be interested in as a small business owner. I have a lot of experience in this regard. I think I could bring a lot to the table, and people are concerned about development in our community. Jobs would be another. Again, when I'm out knocking on doors, people are talking about jobs or underemployment and unemployment numbers. I understand what it's like to develop a workforce and how to create jobs. And then with my nursing background, having worked in the private as well as public sector as a registered nurse, I think healthcare or some of the HHS committees would be a good spot for me.
Okay, thank you. Candidate Isaacson, same question. If elected on November 4, which committees would you seek to serve on? Why? And how do those committees' responsibilities mesh with concerns of your citizens and the businesses in the district?
You know, having been now in office for 2 years, I can tell you that my experience as running on 4 committees, I was lucky enough to be serving before, has given me a really clear understanding of how you stay focused in the House, and it's easy to be sent astray when there's a lot of opportunity there. My focus is going to be very clear. It's going to be on education, finance, commerce, jobs, which I already serve on, and I serve on the education policy right now, and healthcare. I think if you want to talk about how we're going to reach the citizens in our district, it's how are we managing our schools, how well are we creating jobs, how are we supporting the business community, and then finally, how are we looking at healthcare and the real, kind of monkey in the room of the problems we're going to be facing in the next 10 to 20 years with expanding costs. And that's my focus at this point, and I think that represents all aspects of our district. If I am unable to choose one of those, my backup one would be the environment. As a district with 7 lakes in it, I think it's really important that we make sure we represent all aspects of our district. So, thanks.
Thank you. Candidate Gunderson, do you have a response?
No.
Okay, very good. We'll move on to the next question. This question goes to candidate Isaacson. What is your position on increased funding for road and transit improvements? And if elected, how will you promote your position at the legislature?
There is no doubt that we need to spend more money on the aging infrastructure that is our transportation system in Minnesota. Not only the aging infrastructure of roads and bridges, but also how mass transit affects economic opportunity. When you look at mass transit up in the Northeast Metro, it's almost non-existent, and that's really a fault of the overall planning we've had in the 7-county metro, and it's something that I have and will continue to take the legislature and the Met Council to task on. The reality is that we have to look and see there is a projected surplus, and if there is, that's where we need to be looking at investing our money. We've gone through 10 to 15 years of systematic disinvestment in many of the state programs, including transportation, and we're now paying the price for it with an aging infrastructure and really out-of-date roads, and what roads that don't meet the needs or the capacity that are being used for. Second, if we aren't able to find a surplus, then we need to ask ourselves, where are our priorities? One of the things we have to look at when budgeting is we have to ask ourselves, what line item is most important, what's the next most important, what's the next most important, and when you run out of money, you run out of line items. You don't continue to spend, and that's what I'm concerned by, is that we haven't made transportation the priority it needs to be, especially in the positive way and how it impacts our commerce in the state. So I think that's going to be a really important and maybe one of the most key points we have coming in the next legislative session.
Thank you. Candidate Gunderson, same question. What is your position on increased funding for road and transit improvements? And if elected, how will you promote your position at the legislature?
Thank you. Roads and bridges need to be the first priority. I think it's okay to look at alternative methods of transit in the community and what serves our communities correctly and what the citizens are needing and wanting. We can look at transit projects that we've already completed and wonder if they've been successful. I think the jury's still out on some of those light rail projects. I think that we all drive. Why is it important to us? We want to get to work safely. We want to get to our destination safely. We want to get home to our families quickly and safely and efficiently. So I think we need to look at where the problems are in our transportation system as it pertains to roads and bridges, whether or not they need repair, or whether or not we need to reduce bottlenecks and make those the priority.
Thank you. Candidate Isaacson, do you have a response?
Nope.
Very good. We will move on to the next question. This question is for candidate Gunderson. From construction to high tech, Minnesota businesses are having problems finding workers with the talent and skills needed to meet the challenges of today's economy. What do you see as the problems, and what actions would you take to address them?
Thank you. This is a great question. I just read an article recently about the growing number of what were termed as mid-range, good-paying jobs. Excuse me. There's going to be a huge increase in availability of these jobs moving forward, not just at a nationwide level, but state and locally. And as a mom, when I talk to my children, it's always, you go to high school and you do a good job and then you go on to college. Well, college isn't a good fit for everyone. So we need to make students aware of the other opportunities out there through apprenticeships or job training programs. And I think public and private partnerships are the best way to do this. Recently, I worked with some customers of mine, some general contractors as well as the union, and there was a large job fair. So there are opportunities out there. I think that educating students at a young age about the other opportunities, not just going to a four-year school to get a degree, but there are a lot of trades, and that's going to be a huge growing market in our economy.
Thank you. Candidate Isaacson, same question. From construction to high tech, Minnesota businesses are having problems finding workers with the talent and skills needed to meet the challenges of today's economy. What do you see as the problems, and what actions would you take to address them?
Well, I'm grateful for this question, as I have already taken significant actions to address this. I am the chief author of a bill that does a customized training program that is a private-public partnership, as Heidi mentioned. It is occurring in 4 different regions in our state, and is having wonderful success matching employers, employees, and positive training at our local community colleges at the same time. In this next session, my goal is to take that bill and expand it to be statewide. There's a lot of opportunity out there, but we need to start thinking outside the box, and one thing that I was very chastising of Minsky was, we cannot continue to go with this education first, then degree, then a job. We need to understand that today's market requires that we train people on the job, and not only train them on the job with a job that can pay the bills, but also provide them with the education they need so when the next recession happens, they've already been retooled and ready to go. Second, I have authored a bill that's going to be it is currently doing an audit of the entire K-12 system across the entire state, looking to see what vocational education, career technical education courses we have, what kind of equipment we have, and really who are we partnering with to get this done. And that is the prelude to my next bill, which is going to be the first thing I drop at the very beginning of next session if I'm lucky enough to be reelected, which is going to have a significant reinvestment in the idea of career technical education across the state of Minnesota and K through 12, specifically 7 through 12, because we need to bring back the way in which we provide opportunities, the imagination, and really capture the students and get them where they want to go. It's not that forcing people or looking at a track that goes to four-year college is a bad thing, but we need to expand it from philosophy to precision welding and everything in between. And that's been my focus over the last 6 to 8 months, and it will be my focus in the next session, building on the bills that I've already written. So I have a very strong, proven track record of working in this area. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Gunderson, do you have a response?
No?
Okay, very good. I will move on to the next question. Candidate Isaacson, this question is for you. What is your view of Minnesota's regulatory environment? And if it needs changing, how would you change it?
Well, I love questions like this, and I will tell you that there is always room for improvement and efficiencies in the way our government regulates small business, and large business for that matter. There's a couple areas that I really saw that we could make a significant difference in terms of the way we regulate. One of them has to do with the fees we charge professional organizations to manage their organization and their profession. Right now, what I discovered to my shock in the second session of my term was that half the money that we charge those groups on average is just being dumped in the general fund like a cash cow. Half the money, that's ridiculous. That is absolutely unconscionable, because when we talk about small businesses, the lawyer that has his own shingle up is paying his entire own fee, but the larger law firms are paying for their lawyers' fees, so they're not feeling that same burden. It's a regressive tax on small business, and I don't accept it, and it needs to be fixed. The second thing is I think we have to look at property tax relief for small owners, small business owners. And I tie that into this idea of regulation because I think what we need to do is make the cost of doing business less burdensome for small businesses. And that's something I've been committed to in the last session and something I will continue to be committed to in the next session if I'm lucky enough to be reelected. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Gunderson, same question. What is your view of Minnesota's regulatory environment? And if it needs changing, how would you change it?
Thank you. As a small business owner, I am painfully aware of a lot of the regulatory things that are passed down to my business. A lot of things are duplicative and frustrating as a small business owner, take up a lot of my time. I believe that there are ways that the state needs to keep tabs on businesses and make sure that they're in compliance with regulations. However, I think that it's gone about it in the wrong way. A great example is OSHA. In the construction industry, OSHA is a big deal. We want to have safe job sites, we want to have safe workforce. In the past, OSHA was always viewed as scary because you knew when they would come out to your job site, they were going to find something and it was going to cost you money. Even if, despite your best efforts, you were trying to be in compliance, there would always be something. OSHA listened to what small business owners and construction companies were saying, and they developed the OSHA Partnership Program, which has been outstanding. They come now to us and say, on this project, we want to partner with the people on site. We want to work together to ensure safety. We want to identify hazards in the field before an accident happens. And it's much more partnering than punitive. I think that's a great example of how governmental regulations and regulatory agencies can partner with business and make it a much more cooperative effort.
Thank you. Candidate Isaacson, do you have any response?
No.
Very good. The last of our prepared questions, I will ask now. If there are any questions that the audience has, I would ask that you bring those up or get them to our timekeeper and she will get them to us. Candidate Gunderson, this question is for you. Metropolitan Council's Thrive 2040 Comprehensive Plan Blueprint for Infrastructure Development shifts the emphasis on spending to urban and first-tier suburbs and mass transit at the expense of the outer ring suburbs. What is your position on the Met Council's plan, and how will you work to support or modify that plan? Thank
you. Although I think it's good to have good long-term planning for our communities, there's a lot of things in the 2040 plan that I find concerning. The fact that it really leaves out the outer ring suburbs and has such a high focus on transit such as light rail is concerning. It takes the focus away from roads and bridges. It assumes a lot of commercial development along these rail lines that I just don't see coming to fruition, and I don't think it has in some of the other rail lines that have been built and are very, very costly. Let's assume for a second that if we build these railways, there will be all sorts of commercial and residential development. We can't do that on the backs of roads and bridges. We still need to be able, Starbucks still needs coffee to get to their store. We still need to be able to get there to shop at these stores. I think if we look at what's happened down at Central Corridor, it's alarming. And I think that the 2040 plan relies a lot on those same principles that the Central Corridor Light Rail project was built upon. And I just think it really takes a lot of control out of the local community. We have politically appointed people making decisions that are superseding our elected city council officials and our elected county commissioners. And I just don't think that's the direction we should go.
Thank you. Candidate Isaacson, same question. The Metropolitan Council's Thrive 2040 Comprehensive Plan Blueprint for Infrastructure Development shifts the emphasis on spending to urban and first-tier suburbs and mass transit at the expense of the outer ring suburbs. What is your position on the Met Council's plan, and how will you work to support or modify that plan?
I have been painfully clear, not only to the Met Council, but to other members of the legislature and the Hennepin County delegation. We are done being walked on in the East Metro. I have organized and brought together all the East Metro legislators, and we have sat down and said, you know what, we're not going to continue to support increases in funding, we're not going to continue to support increases in taxes, and we're certainly not going to continue to support increases in appropriations as long as you continue to neglect the east side, especially the northeast side, like our area in White Bear Lake and over to Maplewood. It's just unacceptable. And the Met Council's plan is another further example of why we're really taking the time and the money and the resources away from creating a complete metro area rather than a very focused metro area. And I've been just absolutely done with that. And so This next session, I'm going to continue to say, we're not going to support that. I went to the speaker and I told him twice, if you don't give us what we need to continue to develop on the northeast side, you're not going to have our votes for the bonding bill. And I organized our group and we stood out and we got what we wanted. And it's the only way you get what you need up there is by collaborating with other people from nearby districts and putting your voice together. I led that charge. They came to us and said, well, what about a metro-wide sales tax? Have some sales tax to pay for transportation and bridges. I said, are you going to put 40% of that into the East Side Metro? They said no, and we said nope. And you know what? You don't have that sales tax increase, do you? And that's because our side stood together, and we're starting to finally waken up and work on this, and we need to continue to do that. I'm not against the idea of long-term planning, but it's got to be long-term planning that's fair to all the peoples that are involved in that plan, not just a few. And that's what we see right now with the current Met Council plan. And I'm absolutely going to continue to work to represent our interest and to continue to collaborate with local legislators to be a force to be reckoned with in the budgeting process. Thank you.
Candidate Gunderson, you have a response? Okay, we will move to questions from the audience. Our first question goes to candidate Isaacson. Minnesota has mandated a teacher evaluation process. Do you think that teachers' jobs should be strictly based on student test scores?
No. I'm a teacher. Saying the teacher's job should be based on solely teachers' test scores is making many broad assumptions. And one of them is that every single student is the exact same walking in, and it's just what you did to help them that made them better. It doesn't account for their family life. It doesn't account for the nutritional value every day, and it certainly doesn't account for making sure that every student's trying as hard as they could be. I think it's got to be much broader than that. And I frankly, I think that we've done a real disservice to our teachers in the way we've been trying to approach education over the last 10 years. And we are just starting to turn the ball around on that. So, no.
Candidate Gunderson, same question. Minnesota's mandated teacher evaluation process. Do you think that teachers' jobs should be strictly based on student test scores?
No. I think there are way too many variables. Again, with 3 kids in school, I would argue that some of my children are much better test takers than others, and that's just one piece of the puzzle. So to say we're going to evaluate a classroom teacher based upon performance of their students on standardized tests is simply not fair. I think there are many pieces of the puzzle that we need to look at when we're evaluating who are the best teachers in front of our students. And I think this is just a small aspect of that. The growth that kids experience in a classroom, it's not always reflected on a standardized test.
Thank you. This next question from the audience. This question will begin with candidate Gunderson. What will you do to continue job growth in our area?
Okay. I think, again, small business regulations are difficult, and I think that we need to eliminate some of those so businesses can continue to grow, not just in our area, but in the state. I think I've worked in all of our surrounding states in my business, and it's difficult to do business in Minnesota. I think we need to make Minnesota a more friendly place to start, grow, and continue your business, and that's what creates jobs. And I also think back to the earlier question of really working hard with partnering publicly and privately to have apprenticeship programs and job training programs and getting into the schools at an early age, talking to kids about growth. Those are all important factors.
Thank you. Candidate Isaacson, same question. What will you do to continue job growth in our area?
Well, this past session, I've done quite a few things to work on job growth in 42B. One of the most notable is I have a pilot TIF that was established to establish 3 TIF districts, which are tax increment financing districts for Shoreview to continue to expand and grow its economic base and redevelopment over on 96, which is actually just right outside of my district. Not to mention the fact that working with Century College and some of the other local community colleges as well as statewide, developing the customized training program that brings the jobs, the students, and the businesses together to work cohesively rather than separately, and it makes it so they're a lot stronger. The students are stronger, the jobs get what they need, and I think that's really important. You know, we've got a couple of really great businesses, just to name a few, Par Nuclear and St. Jude's Medical, 2 wonderful organizations that do really important corporate citizenship, really important work, not only just for us, but for globally. you know, and I think that we have to continue to do whatever we can to help them become successful and stay successful in their area. I guess St. Jude's is probably already successful, so I misspoke there, but they need to stay successful, and we have to do what we can to make that a positive environment. The government's job is to create an environment in which jobs flourish. The government's job is not to actually create jobs. And I think that's an important distinction that are lost on some people, and I think we need to continue to provide that environment so businesses can be successful. That's what my track record has been, and going forth in the future, we're gonna have to continue to look at these opportunities wherever they are, working with Fadna Sites, working with Shoreview, working with Little Canada, to provide them the kind of advantages Shoreview has, so they have as many tools in the toolbox to be successful.
Okay, thank you. Our next question from the audience will begin with Candidate Isaacson. What are your plans to increase or improve access to health care?
I think that access to health care is something that we've already done a significant amount of work on. We brought the rate of the uninsured down by 40%. And whether people like to talk about MNsure as a dirty word or something that really is getting things done, I think there have been some amazing positive things across the state of Minnesota, providing folks with the lowest cost insurance in the country. Recently we heard about the rates going up by less than 5%. Even after those rate increases, we're still at the lowest rates in the country. And that's really important on average. And we need to continue to work to provide as many opportunities, because when people have health care, people do better. And the reality is that the system we had before was unbelievably broken, making us pay the highest costs for the worst outcomes. Think about that, folks, the highest costs for the worst outcomes. We already had universal health care. It was called the emergency room. Prevention is always better than trying to cure a problem. And when we provide people with health care, we provide them with the opportunity to not have to have long-term problems, standard of living issues, and quality of life issues. And I think that's the most important thing we can do.
Thank you. Candidate Gunderson, same question. What are your plans to increase or improve access to health care?
Thank you. I think we're going to disagree on this one. But not fundamentally. I think that healthcare is really important, and we need to access is a tricky question, because we're talking about access to insurance, or in healthcare we talk about access to providers. I think that from day one, MNsure made a lot of promises to us, and those promises have not come to fruition. We were going to pay less on our premiums, and we're paying more. And being one of the most reasonably priced plans, or MNsure plans in the country, is fine, but we're still paying more. And access is limiting. I spoke with a gentleman the other day who said, I said, how's your day? And he said, well, I had preferred one. So there's frustration. And I talked to a mom who's not able to see her child's pulmonologist anymore. So we're talking about access to, is it access to the doctors that we want to see, or is it access to services we want, or is it access to low-cost quality health care? So it's really quite a big question. Access is a pretty broad term. But I think the bottom line is we were already doing very well in Minnesota with our plan. We were low cost, and we had a lot of great services. And I think one of the things we can do, because we could all sit and talk about everything that everyone has heard and read about MNsure, and there's been a lot of problems. But I think something we can do to lower those premium prices, or we can open the marketplace. I think we need to get some people on the board that can really offer a lot and bring a lot to the table, i.e. insurance executives and things like that, that know how the system runs. The 4.5% rate increase does not take into account the people on preferred one that are no longer on that plan, and it's also an average of the entire state. In our region, our costs are projected for premium pricing to go up at least 18%.
Okay, thank you. The next question from our audience will begin with Candidate Gunderson. What are your plans to improve young people's access to jobs?
I think we've touched on this, and again, I think that partnerships, public and private partnerships within the schools, training these people for the jobs that are going to become available is going to be extremely important. And I think, again, a thriving economy is something we all want to see. I think loosening the regulations on business, allowing them to grow and create more jobs is very important. I think this really kind of wraps up everything that we've been chatting about so far. And we need to continue people to start their business, to continue to encourage businesses to grow in our state and create those jobs. and make sure that we've got the workforce ready to go to fill those positions.
Thank you. Same question, candidate Isaacson. What are your plans to improve young people's access to jobs?
Well, I think I've answered this question twice already, but I'm happy to say again that my work in customized training and working to partner with the schools in K through 12 is going to be essential in this next term to really reinvigorate the idea of career and technical education. I do need to step back though. 18% just simply isn't true. The highest you're going to see anywhere in the state is 17%, and many people are going to see a reduction up to 9%, and I think that's a really important distinction to make. Second thing that I think is important is that what MNsure has done, and there is no doubt there are problems in the beginning, but what MNsure has done, it has simply created much more access. The number of people that flooded my office with mail, unsolicited, saying that this is the best quality health insurance they've ever had at the cheapest price they've ever had it, from around the district and around the state, was simply stunning. There is no doubt that MNsure has been a success. And I will continue to tell you that when you look at Wisconsin, who didn't implement their own exchange, they're looking at rates 79 to 99% higher. And the last thing I'd remind everybody, this is a really important point, folks, 5%, less than a 5% increase, that's the lowest rate of increase we've seen in 15 years, thanks to MNsure. So let's be really clear that the MNsure is an open marketplace, and the reality is that we're looking at increases that are far less than even what we had in 2008, going back to sometimes as high as 17% on average across the state. So I will continue to defend, and it is something we respectfully disagree on, but I want to make sure that the facts are being set straight, because there is a lot of misinformation going on out there right now.
Thank you. I apologize. Did I give you a chance to answer that question?
I did answer my question.
I thought so. Okay. Just didn't want to miss. This next audience question goes to candidate Isaacson first. What are your plans to deal with student debt?
That is such a great question, and it hits home with me having advanced degrees. I can tell you that student debt has been a real problem. And when you look at the history of how we paid for school in Minnesota, years back, I'm talking years back, the state covered 75% of the cost of higher education and students covered 25% of the cost. Now it's completely inverse. The reality is that we are not only making tuition and everything higher than it should be, the cost of living goes up, but we're also now, the Republicans in Congress raised the interest rates on student loans that we're currently charging, which then make them more predatory. So the reality is people are being buried in their student loans. They're being married to their debt and their degree, hoping that they can find a job. That is absolutely inappropriate. This last session, we froze tuition across the state in both MnSCU and University of Minnesota, and I anticipate we're going to do the same again this next year. We offered way more in grants to people that were in need, and that's another way we can attack this issue. Student debt is really unconscionable. I was speaking with a gentleman from Germany who's part of their union system over there about how apprenticeships work, and he said one of the most striking things to him that didn't make any sense at all is the fact that we create financial barriers to getting a higher education in the first place. That doesn't even make sense to him. And I have to agree, when you think about it in those terms, why do we create barriers to something that only helps all of our society? That doesn't even make sense. And I'm not suggesting we're going to start offering tuition for free. Obviously, we have a different system here in America, but it does make you stop to think, why do we continue to make it harder and harder, especially for middle-class families? And that's where we need to take a look at, is that donut hole of middle-class families. How are we going to provide them with as many opportunities as possible when you've got a working mom and working dad who make just enough not to get really good financial aid, but not enough to help their students go to college? That's going to be my next priority in the next session, what we can do on a state level to help with that problem. Thank you.
Candidate Gunderson, same question. What are your plans to deal with student debt?
Thank you. I think it's a problem. I think we encourage our kids to go out and get an education, and they come out the other end hoping to find a job in the field that they've been studying, and buried in debt and moving back into their parents' basement. I hear this story all the time. I think it's a problem. I think we need to look at how why are our tuition costs so high? How can we lower tuition costs to make the overall debt at the other end of the education a little bit more palatable? I think that we need to look at lowering those costs for students by looking very hard at efficiencies and administrative costs in our university system.
Thank you. This next question will begin with candidate Gunderson. What do you see as areas of opportunity for improving transparency and accountability of government, not only in the legislature itself, but of public servants and departments at all levels?
Thank you. I think transparency is extremely important. And I think that each individual legislator has a responsibility to their constituents to let them know what they're doing and what's happening down in St. Paul. I think that's where the transparency begins. And I think that the public needs to know what decisions are being made. There shouldn't be a lot of backroom things happening that no one has any idea how we get to the other end of a bill. When legislation is introduced and it goes through all these different changes and there's no public response allowed, I think that's a problem. So I think it starts with who you choose to elect, and hopefully the folks that we're electing are transparent and communicating with their constituents.
Thank you. Candidate Isaacson, same question. What do you see as areas of opportunity for improving transparency and accountability of government, not only in the legislature itself, but of public servants and departments at all levels?
This past 2 years, I've been privileged and honored by the reality and the fact that I've been in the top 10% when it comes to responding to constituent services and providing constituent services to the people of 42B. I've had the opportunity to talk and meet with people from all over the district and really give them an idea of what's going on, not to mention that I put out a newsletter every quarter that gives them an idea of what is happening up at the legislature. The reality is that, especially when you look at how leadership works and the way our legislators set up, there are moments in which legislation comes through at the last second. And I think that's exactly right. We have a problem with transparency in that spot. We have a problem because at our Capitol, we don't provide the access necessary, and we don't give the people an opportunity to see and watch the process at work. When we have meetings going on at 1 o'clock in the morning, when we're on a deadline to get through the end of session, and we're racing through all these bills, it's quite amazing how fast things turn around and change on a dime. And I remember I would argue and go negotiate something in the Senate. By the time I got back to the House, it's been renegotiated and changed. It happens so fast, and we're not equipped at this point to really provide the opportunity for public access the way we need to. However, I'm grateful to say that after the public renovation and the development of the new Senate building, we're going to have that opportunity because there's going to be plenty of more access, which is why the bipartisan agreement that passed that in the first place brought forth the need for more access across the state capitol. And that's going to be essential. The second thing when it comes to the government agencies is we need to continue to hold our agencies accountable to the public comment period and make sure that those that are in charge are responding efficiently and correctly to all the citizens concerned on whatever issue and whatever department we're referring to. Thank you.
This will be our final question for the evening, and we'll begin with candidate Isaacson. This district has seen large amounts of road construction lately and has more scheduled. This has been touted as an economic benefit to the area. Beyond the immediate construction jobs, how do you see that economic benefit being realized in the medium and the long term?
You know, we're really just getting started. We're going to create a corridors of commerce here on 694 that I worked hard to get, and we need to also replace those bridges. There's 3 bridges along 694. When you look at almost every stretch of 694, 494 loop between Lexington and the 35E weave, or unweave the weave, that's the only spot that hadn't had significant work done in the last 20 years. I will continue to work on that. And how it provides an economic benefit, well, just go talk to Par Systems or go talk to St. Jude when they did some construction and helped out with that bridge. The reality is we have tons of business that needs to get their freight, needs to get their products, and they need to get their employees back and forth from the business, and we're constricting that. It's an area that doesn't allow for the smooth transition, and all you have to do is be on Sioux Road just for a little while, that frontage road at 5 o'clock, and watch it get backed up 500 cars to go take a left to get on a road that then gets on it goes over the tracks, supposing there isn't a train there already, and then you've got to go through the lights to get on Wright Street, then to go get on 694. And these are people that have worked hard all day. We've got to do a better job of providing the opportunity for our companies to not only have a place to do commerce, but also for their employees to be able to get in and out of work efficiently. So these constructions, while they are a pain, and don't get me wrong, I hear the pound in Little Canada every night when they're working on that, because I don't live that far from the interstate. I'm not a fan of, but what I am a fan of is if we are forward-thinking and provide us with solutions that last the next 10 years instead of the next 2. I struggle with the Department of Transportation. I'm not sure we're always that forward-thinking, but we need to become that. Thank you.
Candidate Gunderson, same question. This district has seen large amounts of road construction lately and has more scheduled. This has been touted as an economic benefit to the area. Beyond the immediate construction jobs, how do you see that economic benefit being realized in the medium and the long term?
Thank you. I would echo a lot of the same things that Representative Isaacson said. I think it's really important for the commerce in our district to make sure that customers can get to their businesses that freight can get there so they can service the community. I think that a lot of the construction projects, for instance, the 694 project, that was great, and it loosened up a lot of bottlenecks. However, it would have been great to have another lane. So I would also echo what Representative Isaacson said about, I don't know how long-term some of these solutions are, but we need to make that more of a funding priority so we can look at the long-term rather than like, let's just fix this right now. So I think that the jobs are there short-term. Road construction will always be short-term jobs. Excuse me. But the long-term result needs to be a focus on getting folks where they need to go, getting us where we need to go, home to our families safely and efficiently.
Thank you. With that, we will wrap up our question portion of our forum, and we'll finish up by giving each of the candidates an opportunity to offer some closing thoughts and statements. We'll begin with candidate Isaacson. You have about a minute. Caught you off guard, sorry.
You did, that's all right. This election is fundamentally down to a choice, and you can tell both Heidi and I are thoughtful, and we care about our environment, and we see a lot of the same things that need to be fixed. But there's a bigger thing at stake here, and I want to really point that out. At the end of the day, if Heidi's elected or if I'm elected, who we vote for speaker is going to determine a lot about the state and the policy frame for the next 2 years. And I would remind you that the policy frame of the Republicans for the last 2 years has been to vote against the Women's Economic Security Act, to vote against all-day kindergarten, to vote against the balanced budget that we have, to vote against the bullying bill, to vote against marriage equality, to vote for the right to work. They also are the ones that brought to you this idea of voter identification. I want to be clear about something, that there is a clear choice here, and it isn't just about who Heidi and I are, although I do think there are some distinct differences. It's also about who would we put in charge to be our leader. And I think it's fundamentally important that you remember that the last time the Republicans were in charge, they borrowed from our schools to balance the budget. They robbed the tobacco fund by borrowing millions of dollars we're going to be paying off over the next 30 years. You want to talk about fiscal responsibility, take a look at the budget now. It is balanced. And that is the most important thing I can say without any shifts, any gimmicks. And we will continue to make sure that our state is functioning on a positive level with programs that benefit all Minnesotans, not just a few. So I think there is a clear choice, and in no way do I mean that as a difference to Heidi as much as I mean that there's a difference in political ideology here that will guide our state. I'd love to have your vote in November. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Gunderson, your closing statements.
Well, that's a lot of information I don't get to respond to, but that's okay. My closing statements are, I would like to thank you folks for being here. I would like to, again, thank you for being here, Representative Isaacson, I appreciate it. It's been a great opportunity. I hope that lots of folks will watch this on cable, since clearly everyone else is at home right now watching the Viking-Packer game. I can truly say that this experience thus far has been wonderful. I've met so many great people in my community. I've lived in this district for 26 years of my life. And when you live somewhere that long, you think you know your community until you really go out and start knocking on folks' doors and really meeting people. What I can commit to the citizens of 42B is that I will listen, learn, and lead. What's important to the citizens is what's important to me. And that's the message I hope to carry forth to St. Paul after November 4th, and I hope to earn your vote. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. I'd like to thank our candidates, Jason Isaacson on my left and Heidi Gunderson on the right. I want to also thank the City of Shoreview for providing us with this venue to hold the forum, and with cable TV for recording it. And thank also our sponsors, the Twin Cities North Chamber of Commerce, the North Metro Mayors Association, and the North Metro I-35 Corridor Coalition. Most of all, I'd like to thank the audience members who have come out tonight to attend, as well as the folks at home that are watching this live broadcast, as well as those of you who may pick up and watch it on a recorded basis. Thank you very much, and that concludes the forum for House District 42B. Thank you.
Thank you.